It started with a smirk. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett stood tall at the podium inside the packed federal courtroom, her notes in hand, voice clear and confident. The atmosphere was charged. This wasn't a typical hearing. It was a high-stakes oversight motion involving public funds, a controversial judicial ruling, and a judge known for his unfiltered disdain for elected officials, Judge Andrew H. Stones. From the bench, Stones leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "Congresswoman Crockett," he said, his tone syrupy with sarcasm, "while your passion is admirable, this is a court of law, not an episode of daytime television." The gallery chuckled. Jasmine didn't flinch. He went on. "Maybe next time bring fewer theatrics and more legal substance. Unless you left that part in your office." The courtroom buzzed with whispers, and one of the court clerks even let out a quiet snort. Jasmine paused. She looked directly at him, not with anger, but with calculation. "Your Honor," she began, calm and composed, "since you've made this personal, let me respond professionally." Then she reached into her briefcase and pulled out a sealed envelope stamped with a federal oversight seal. The energy in the courtroom shifted. The murmurs grew louder as Jasmine Crockett laid the sealed envelope on the evidence table. "This," she said, tapping it gently, "is a certified audit report from the Office of Congressional Ethics, delivered this morning. It directly challenges a series of rulings made under your bench, Judge Stones." Judge Stones raised an eyebrow, visibly annoyed. "Are you implying misconduct, Congresswoman?" "No," Jasmine replied smoothly. "I'm presenting evidence that implies it." The judge leaned back in his chair, attempting to regain control. But the gallery was now dead silent. Reporters scribbled. Phones buzzed on silent mode. She continued, "This report includes a timeline of decisions, one of which coincides with a transfer of funds traced to a shell company, registered in Nevada, under a law firm tied to a name found in your 2017 disclosures." Judge Stones clenched his jaw. For the first time, he didn't have a quick comeback. One of the federal attorneys turned in his seat to whisper to the clerk. "Is this real?" someone muttered behind Jasmine. She heard it. And she answered without turning around. "It's very real." The judge cleared his throat. "Do you intend to submit that as evidence or stage a performance?" Without breaking eye contact, Jasmine handed it to the court-martial. "Let's put it into the record, Your Honor. I'm not here to perform. I'm here to expose." And just like that, the courtroom changed. The power dynamic flipped. Judge Stones tapped his gavel once, hard. "This court will take a short recess to review the submitted material," he announced tersely, voice tighter than before. But everyone in the room could tell, it wasn't about procedure. It was about control. And he was losing it. Jasmine stepped away from the podium and returned to her seat, calm and silent. She didn't need to say more. The courtroom was now buzzing with quiet tension. Reporters rushed out into the hallway to file early stories. One even whispered into her recorder, "Crockett flips the courtroom." Judge Stones visibly shaken. Inside the judge's chambers, Stones slammed the envelope down on his desk. His clerk hovered nearby, pale and uneasy. "Sir," the clerk said cautiously, "if this is legitimate." "It's not," Stones barked. "It's political theater." But even he didn't sound convinced. He tore open the seal. Inside was a 43-page dossier with signatures from 3 federal auditors and a special counsel review stamp. Stones flipped through the first 10 pages, dates, bank logs, memos, all itemized. There it was, a transfer logged from a group called Delmont Holdings, routed through 2 states, connected to a judge's foundation. His name. His foundation. He froze. Back in the courtroom, Jasmine waited silently. No notes, no phone, no whispering to aides. She didn't have to move another muscle. She had done what no one expected, she made the judge blink. 15 minutes passed. Then 20. When Judge Stones finally re-entered the courtroom, his face looked different. Less color. Less confidence. Everyone stood. He didn't make eye contact with Jasmine. "This court is now back in session," he muttered, tapping the gavel with less force than before. "Congresswoman Crockett, this court acknowledges receipt of the report you submitted." There was no sarcasm in his voice now. Jasmine stood slowly. Measured. Unshaken. "Thank you, Your Honor. I request the court read aloud pages 18 through 21 into the record. The timeline will explain the concern more clearly than I ever could." Judge Stones hesitated, then gave a slight nod. The clerk began to read. On May 11, 2021, a $150,000 transfer from Delmont Holdings was received by the Stones Judicial Outreach Fund. On May 13, 2021, Ruling 22-0484 was issued in favor of a Delmont-affiliated contractor, overruling two lower court findings. Whispers swept through the gallery like wind through dry leaves. The facts were aligning too perfectly. Even the federal prosecutor sat up straighter, eyebrows raised. Jasmine didn't smile. She didn't flinch. She simply leaned on the lectern, eyes locked on the bench. And for the first time since he'd mocked her, Judge Stones wouldn't look up. He adjusted his glasses. Cleared his throat. And then said the last thing anyone in the room expected: "This hearing is suspended until further review." Gasps. Jasmine slowly gathered her folder. But before she turned, she said one final thing. "Sometimes, Your Honor, justice doesn't come in robes. Sometimes, it walks in wearing heels." And she walked out, leaving a judge, a courtroom, and a legal system in complete silence. The moment Jasmine Crockett exited the courtroom doors, flashbulbs exploded in the hallway. Reporters shoved microphones in her direction, yelling over each other, "Congresswoman, are you accusing Judge Stones of corruption? Was that audit authorized by the House Oversight Committee? Do you expect charges to be filed?" Jasmine raised her hand calmly. The crowd quieted. "What you all witnessed today wasn't an accusation, it was accountability. And I didn't bring it alone. I brought facts." Her voice was clear, unwavering. The cameras loved it. The public would too. Inside, Judge Stones sat frozen on the bench long after the courtroom had cleared. His clerk was gone. His bailiff stood awkwardly near the door. The report sat in front of him like a ticking bomb. And then came the sound he dreaded most, his personal phone buzzing. He glanced down. Incoming call, Chief Judicial Ethics Office. He didn't answer. He couldn't. Meanwhile, across town, a DOJ analyst was already scanning the dossier Crockett submitted. Emails. Transfers. Names. "We've got something," the analyst said, eyes wide. "And it's bigger than Stones." Back at her office, Jasmine closed the blinds and sank into her chair. Her chief of staff handed her a cup of tea and asked the obvious question, "Did you plan to take him down today?" Jasmine looked out the window. "No," she said. "I plan to make him think twice before mocking another woman with power." She took a sip. Then added, "The takedown? That was just a bonus." By morning, the footage had gone viral. Clips of Judge Stones mocking Jasmine Crockett played side by side with her silent takedown. Social media was ablaze. #Crockett crushed it, #judge the judge. She didn't raise her voice, she raised the bar. Cable news panels debated the implications non-stop. CNN ran the headline, "Federal Judge Under Fire After Congresswoman Reveals Explosive Ethics Report." On MSNBC, Crockett's precision strike, what it means for judicial oversight. Even conservative networks, usually critical of her, struggled to spin it. Meanwhile, inside the Department of Justice, a task force had been greenlit, quietly, but decisively. What began as an oversight hearing was rapidly evolving into something far larger. Stones wasn't the only judge flagged in the audit. There were 4 others. All connected. Back at Capitol Hill, Jasmine was preparing for her next hearing when a staffer rushed in with a printed email. "Ma'am, this just came through. The Chief Justice's office wants a private meeting." She glanced at it, then folded the page neatly. "Of course they do." Her team was stunned. "You're actually going to meet with them?" "Yes," she said. "But I won't be bringing tea." She grabbed her coat and turned to her aide. "Schedule the press briefing for tomorrow. If the judiciary wants to talk, we talk. If they want to pressure me," she paused, then smiled. "We let the public listen in." The next afternoon, Jasmine Crockett walked into the tall marble halls of the Supreme Judicial Building. No cameras. No press. Just silence and the echo of her heels against the polished floor. She was escorted to a private chamber, mahogany walls, leather-bound books, and a round table already occupied by 3 men in suits, including Chief Justice Warwick, a towering figure with a reputation for keeping internal scandals buried. He didn't rise when she entered. "Congresswoman Crockett," he said curtly, gesturing to the chair across from him, "thank you for agreeing to meet. We'd prefer to keep this matter contained." Jasmine remained standing. That would have been easier before Judge Stones made a public mockery of this institution. Warwick's lips thinned. One of the other justices leaned in. "You've made powerful waves, Ms. Crockett. But there's a fine line between oversight and destabilization." She looked at each of them. "And there's a finer line between protection and complicity. They didn't expect that." Warwick cleared his throat. "You have every right to pursue oversight. But you should understand, federal judges don't fall easily. These matters take time, diplomacy." "Truth doesn't need time," she interrupted. "It needs daylight. And if you won't provide it, I will." She placed a flash drive on the table. "There are names in that file who've ruled on civil rights, environmental rollbacks, election laws, all while accepting funds from the same network tied to Stones." The room fell deathly quiet. Warwick's hand hovered over the flash drive, but he didn't pick it up. "You're not afraid of where this goes, are you?" he asked finally. "No," Jasmine said. "But you should be." She turned to leave, her voice calm but final, "because I'm not here to shake the system, I'm here to reset it." That night, while Washington slept uneasily, Jasmine Crockett's team was wide awake. The flash drive she left behind. A decoy. The real files had already been uploaded to a secure congressional server, with sealed backups sent to 2 investigative reporters, one at the Washington Post, the other at ProPublica. At 7:42 a.m., the first headline hit, "Network of Judicial Ties Exposed, Leaked Documents Reveal Millions in Undisclosed Transfers." Less than an hour later, the second wave followed, audit points to pattern of rulings aligned with hidden donations, federal judges named, 5 judges. 3 circuits. And one of them sat on the same ethics panel reviewing Crockett's report. The blowback was immediate. Calls flooded the Judicial Review Board. Senate aides scrambled. Congressional members who'd once distanced themselves from Crockett were now asking for closed-door briefings. Judge Stones, meanwhile, had gone radio silent. His chambers were locked. Reporters camped outside his house. A U.S. Marshal vehicle was spotted parked discreetly at the curb. Back on the Hill, Jasmine stood at the podium once again, this time with cameras rolling and allies flanking her left and right. This isn't about vengeance. It's about validation, for every citizen who ever questioned whether justice was for sale. She paused, then delivered the line that would echo across every network, "The courtroom laughed at me. But now the truth is laughing back." Thunderous applause erupted behind her. No smirks. No mockery. Just the sound of power shifting in real time. By midday, the backlash began. Not from the public, but from within the system. An anonymous leak revealed that several senior judicial aides had quietly opened internal inquiries into Jasmine Crockett herself. Nothing concrete, just whispers, an expenses audit here, a misfiled form there. Manufactured smoke. A thinly veiled warning. Jasmine's communications director stormed into her office, red-faced. They're coming after you now. They want to drown you in process, bog you down while they regroup. Jasmine calmly set down her pen. Of course they are, she replied. They don't know how to deal with a woman who doesn't blink. Outside, cameras still flashed. Protesters had gathered, some supporting Jasmine, others accusing her of attacking the judicial branch. But she didn't flinch. That evening, an unexpected call came through from an old contact at the FBI. Not official. Just a quiet message, stay alert. Some of the names in your file. They don't play by courtroom rules. She nodded silently and hung up. Her next move wasn't defense, it was escalation. She scheduled a primetime town hall. Aired nationally. Not in a studio, but on the courthouse steps where it all began. As the crowd gathered under floodlights, Jasmine stepped to the mic. If they want to dig through my past, they're welcome to. I've got nothing to hide. But here's the question I have for every judge watching this tonight, can you say the same? That line ricocheted across screens. And somewhere in a dark room, Judge Stones finally picked up the phone. Get me a lawyer, he said. And not the cheap kind. 2 days later, the pressure reached a breaking point. Judge Andrew H. Stones, once untouchable, once arrogant enough to mock a sitting congresswoman in open court, was served with an official subpoena. His financial records were seized. His travel history was flagged. His judicial privileges were suspended indefinitely. The Judicial Ethics Board issued a rare public statement. We are reviewing serious allegations of impropriety and undisclosed financial entanglements involving Judge Stones and other members of the federal bench. We thank Congresswoman Crockett for her commitment to transparency and justice. The courtroom that once laughed at her name. Silent. But Jasmine Crockett wasn't celebrating. She was preparing for what came next. Her office received word from the House Oversight Chair. She was being asked to lead a special task force, an independent review of the judicial appointment process. No longer just an oversight figure, but a reformer. That night, she stood before the Capitol, the dome glowing behind her. Dozens of reporters stood shoulder to shoulder. Phones streamed her speech live to millions. This was never about one judge. This was never about me. It's about the principle that no title, not even, Your Honor, should place anyone above accountability. She paused. They mocked me. Tried to break me. But they forgot one thing, I don't answer to power, I challenge it. Applause erupted. In a nearby hotel room, Judge Stones watched the broadcast alone, tie loosened, eyes sunken. The sound of Crockett's voice echoed off the walls. And in that moment, even he knew, the courtroom belonged to her now. Weeks passed. Judge Stones resigned under medical advisement, though everyone knew it was code. 3 more federal judges named in the leaked files stepped down quietly. 1 was indicted. A 4th vanished from public view entirely. And Jasmine Crockett? She rose. The oversight task force she now led began hearings that were broadcast live, drawing millions of viewers. Testimony after testimony exposed decades of unchecked judicial dealings, ghost donors, corporate influence, secret retreats masked as conferences. Americans started paying attention. For the first time in a generation, one journalist wrote, a member of Congress has cracked open the seal of judicial immunity, and dared to ask what's inside. Jasmine's approval rating soared. She was being invited to morning shows, late-night panels, ethics forums. Even lawmakers who once called her too outspoken were suddenly eager to sit beside her. But Jasmine remained grounded. She returned to the same courthouse where it began, this time, not to testify, but to teach. A group of young law students waited eagerly as she walked them through the courtroom. This bench, she said, tapping the judge's seat. It's not a throne. It's a duty. Remember that. One student raised her hand. How did you stay calm when he mocked you? Jasmine smiled faintly. Because I wasn't there for applause, I was there for change. And I knew something they didn't. The student leaned in. What's that? Jasmine looked around the empty courtroom, then back at them. That truth doesn't whisper. It waits. And when the time is right, it roars. Months later, a mural was painted on a quiet street in Houston, Jasmine Crockett standing tall, courtroom in the background, documents in hand, and beneath her in bold letters, "Truth doesn't flinch." Her confrontation with Judge Stones had become more than a viral moment. It sparked a national movement. Law schools began updating their curriculum to include the Crockett Doctrine, a framework for holding judicial figures accountable through nonpartisan oversight. Legal watchdog groups saw record donations. Whistleblower hotlines lit up. And perhaps most symbolically, Congress passed the Judicial Transparency Act, a once-stalled bill Crockett had co-sponsored, now signed into law by overwhelming bipartisan vote. At the signing, the Speaker of the House handed her the pen. For the voice that refused to be silenced, he said. She didn't gloat. She simply nodded and said, now let's make sure the next voice doesn't have to scream to be heard. Far away, in a gated home outside D.C., Judge Andrew H. Stone sat in a leather chair, watching the broadcast. No robe. No bench. Just silence. He turned off the TV. Meanwhile, Jasmine stood beneath the Capitol dome, one hand resting on the podium she once stood behind, where the world first learned that sometimes, one voice can shift an entire branch of government. And this time, no one laughed.